I sat in the corner of the table, the red wine in my hand, catching the chandelier's shimmer like blood under crystal. Laughter bounced off the walls, sharp, jagged, slicing through the air. Jim raised his glass, his voice a blade. Another month of unemployment, huh, sweetie? Maybe try a coffee shop gig. His buddies, Ethan, Ryan, Noah, erupted, their suits crisp, their grins wide. Glasses clinked, a toast to my failure. I dipped my head, letting my hair curtain my face, feigning the sting they expected. Their amusement gleamed brighter than the light overhead. They didn't know. How could they? Jim, my husband, the vice president of Horizon Tech, lounging in his arrogance. Ethan, smirking over his whiskey. Ryan, chuckling into his sleeve. Noah, leaning back like a king. They thought they ruled the room, the company, the world. Senior executives, untouchable, basking in their power. I sipped my wine, the taste sharp on my tongue, masking the faintest curl of a smile. They had no idea who I was. My name is Mia Thompson. I'm 38. I built Horizon Tech from a single idea in a cramped apartment into a tech giant dominating the market. I'm the CEO, the founder, the one who signs their checks, approves their bonuses, greenlights their bloated egos. And Jim? He's my husband. For 7 years, I've played this game, pretending to be the struggling wife, the nobody he props up with his paycheck. Tonight, he wielded me like a punchline, same as always. "Who knows, you might get lucky," he crowed, and the table roared again. I traced the rim of my glass with a finger, cool and steady. They didn't know that in a few hours their smug little empire would crack wide open. The titles they flaunted, mine to strip away. The contracts they bragged about, mine to redirect. Horizon Tech wasn't theirs. It was mine. Always had been. I'd watched them strut for years, blind to the woman in the corner, the one who'd been pulling strings while they laughed. Jim caught my eye, his grin faltering for a split second, maybe a flicker of something. Unease he couldn't place. I smiled back, soft, submissive, the way he liked. "Enjoy your night, gentlemen," I said, voice low, a whisper under their noise. They didn't hear the edge. They didn't sense the cliff they were dancing on. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, I step out of the shadows. For now, I let them laugh, let them drink, let them think they've won. The wine was bitter, but victory, that would taste sweeter. 7 years ago, I met Jim Harper. I was 31, fresh off founding Horizon Tech in secret, a startup no one knew about yet, least of all him. He was 35, charming, a rising star at a rival firm. I could have told him the truth. I'm Mia Thompson, a businesswoman, with a company already turning heads. Instead, I lied. I said I was a freelance marketing analyst, scraping by on odd jobs, still finding my footing. He bought it. Hook, line, sinker. Asked me out that night. 6 months later, we were married. It was an experiment. I'd built Horizon from nothing. Late nights, endless pitches, a gamble that paid off. But I wanted to see who Jim really was, what he'd do if he thought I had no power, no status. So I rented a modest apartment, drove a beat-up Toyota, dressed in quiet humility. He didn't question it. At first he was warm, supportive. "You'll figure it out, Mia," he'd say, arm around my shoulders, eyes soft. I'd nod, hiding the smirk, knowing my company was already outpacing his. That kindness didn't last. Horizon grew, silently, under my real name, through shell companies he never connected to me. I kept it hidden, feeding him stories of failed gigs, lost clients. He started to shift. The encouragement faded, replaced by impatience, then pity. "Freelancing's tough," he'd mutter, scrolling his phone, barely looking up. I'd murmur agreement, folding laundry in our small living room while, in my office downtown, I was signing multi-million-dollar deals. I let him think he was the breadwinner, the hero. He moved up, joined Horizon Tech as VP, a job I approved through layers of anonymity. he never suspected. I watched him change, saw the man behind the mask emerge. The experiment worked too well. By the time I was 38, he didn't just pity me, he despised me. A wife with no career, no ambition, unworthy of his pride. I stayed quiet, letting the lie grow, letting him build his throne on sand, because I knew something he didn't. I wasn't the one who'd fall. The shift wasn't sudden. It crept in, slow and ugly, over years. Jim thrived on it, on being the savior in our story. By 42, he was Horizon Tech's golden boy, strutting in tailored suits, flashing a Rolex I'd indirectly paid for. I was still the freelancer, the lucky wife he supported. Our apartment stayed modest. He liked the narrative, the humble king. But the warmth was gone. He'd come home, toss his keys on the counter, barely glance at me. "Rough day?" I'd ask. "You wouldn't get it?" He'd snap, pouring a scotch. Dinners with his crew, Ethan, Ryan, Noah, became the stage. They'd gather at our place or some upscale spot, all sharp ties and sharper tongues. I'd sit there, quiet, the prop in his play. "Mia's still chasing that big break," he'd say, smirking, and they'd laugh, a chorus of hyenas. I'd nod, pick at my food, let them think I was embarrassed. Inside, I was counting, every jab, every sneer. Ethan would chime in, "Maybe retail's hiring." Ryan snort, Noah'd raise a glass. Jim loved it, the spotlight, the power. Tonight was peak performance. The chandelier gleamed, the wine flowed, and Jim held court. "Coffee shop assistant," he said, eyes glinting, voice loud enough to carry. "Might be your speed, sweetie." The table exploded, Ethan slapping the wood, Ryan choking on his drink, Noah grinning like a shark. I lowered my head, hair shielding my face, playing the part. They didn't see my grip tighten on the glass, didn't feel the air shift. I raised it to my lips, slow, deliberate, tasting the bite of it. They were blind. Those promotions they bragged about, I'd signed them. The budgets they controlled, I'd approved them. Horizon Tech was my creation, my machine, and they were cogs I'd placed. Jim thought he held me up, but I'd been holding him, his career, his life, for years. I set the glass down, soft, clink against the table. "Enjoy it, Jim," I murmured, too low for them to catch. He didn't need to hear it yet. Tomorrow the curtain lifts, 7 years of his contempt, his games. I'd watched, waited, let him dig his grave. Tonight, he toasted my failure, oblivious to the empire beneath my feet. I smiled, small, secret, the kind he'd never notice. They laughed on, drunk on their own noise, while I sat in the corner, steady, ready. The shift was over. His reign was done. The shift in Jim's behavior was my signal. Years of mockery had peeled back his mask, but suspicion wasn't enough. I needed proof, something ironclad to shatter his world and his cronies with it. 2 years ago, at 36, I started digging. It began with whispers, overheard boasts at those dinners, offhand comments about side deals and perks. Jim and his crew, Ethan, Ryan, Noah, were sloppy, too comfortable in their power at Horizon Tech. I'd built the company to be a titan, but they were gnawing at its bones. I couldn't let it stand. I hired private investigators, the best money could buy, discreet, ruthless, invisible. They tailed Jim first, shadowing him to late-night meetings in dimly lit bars, places he'd never take me. Photos came back, him shaking hands with executives from rival firms, passing envelopes under tables. Then, Ethan, caught at a yacht party funded by Horizon's accounts, grinning with suppliers who'd overcharged us for years. Ryan and Noah followed, secret lunches, golf courses, deals whispered over cigars. The evidence piled up, a paper trail of greed I could have framed and hung on my wall. But I didn't stop there. Suspicion had teeth now, and I gave it claws. I installed a surveillance system within Horizon Tech's own infrastructure, an invisible net woven into emails, servers, phone lines. No one noticed. IT reported to me, not Jim, though he'd never suspect it. The data flowed, leaked bid prices to competitors, contracts rigged for kickbacks, company funds siphoned into offshore accounts. One email from Jim to Ethan stood out. Keep HR quiet, she's replaceable. About a junior staffer who'd complained of harassment. They'd buried her, like they buried anyone who didn't bow. What I uncovered wasn't just corruption, it was rot. They weren't content skimming profits. They were selling Horizon's secrets piece by piece to line their pockets. Text messages bragged about it. Noah to Ryan. Another million in the bag, they'll never trace it. Video clips showed Ethan mocking subordinates in meetings, his voice dripping with disdain. I found audio, too. Jim on a call, laughing about keeping the wife in the dark while he planned a bonus for himself with stolen funds. Every file, every recording was a brick in the wall I'd build to crush them. I sat in my hidden office downtown, the city's hum faint through the glass, sifting through it all. 2 years of this, watching, waiting, documenting, had turned suspicion into a weapon. I had enough to send them to jail, but that wasn't the plan. Not yet. Horizon Tech was mine, and I'd reclaim it first, strip them bare before the world. The investigators asked if I wanted more, but I shook my head. This was plenty. I needed one last piece, though. Proof of their culture, their cruelty, straight from the source. So I decided to step into their lair myself, not as Mia Thompson, but as someone they'd never suspect. The trap was set, and they'd walk right in. The evidence was a vault, locked and loaded, but I craved the raw truth of their world, how they treated the powerless, the ones they deemed beneath them. At 38, I crafted Sophie Miller, a struggling nobody with a fake resume, modest suit, slightly scuffed shoes. I applied to Horizon Tech, my own company, for a low-level marketing job. The application went through HR, people I'd hired but who'd never seen my face. Days later, an email pinged. Interview scheduled, 7th floor Tuesday. I smiled. They had no idea. I walked into the conference room, hair pulled back, shoulders hunched just enough. 3 faces I knew stared back: Ethan, Ryan, Noah, Jim's inner circle, sprawled in their chairs like judges at a circus. Ethan flipped through my resume, sneering. Unemployed for a while, huh, Sophie? His tone was a jab, testing me. I nodded, voice soft, timid. Yes, it's been tough finding the right fit. Ryan leaned forward, sizing me up, a smirk tugging his lips. Market's brutal. We get hundreds better than this. Noah didn't bother hiding his boredom, scrolling his phone while I spoke. They didn't ask about skills or experience, just probed for weakness, something to mock. I fed it to them, stumbling over answers, letting my hands fidget. Ethan cut in, sharp. Why should we bother with you? I mumbled about hard work, dedication, words they didn't care to hear. Halfway through, their phones buzzed, one after another. Noah chuckled, glancing at the screen. You've got to be kidding, he muttered, smirking at Ethan. I didn't need to look. Jim had texted them, probably watching from his office, laughing at Sophie, the loser his wife could have been. They grinned wider, feeding off it. The interview lasted 15 minutes, but they spent 10 tearing me apart. Ryan flicked my resume aside like trash. We'll be in touch, he said, voice dripping with fake pity. Ethan stood, already dismissing me. Noah didn't even look up. I thanked them, head bowed, and shuffled out, the perfect picture of defeat. The door clicked shut behind me, and I straightened, a faint smile breaking through. I didn't need their callback. I'd seen it all, their contempt, their casual cruelty, the toxic swamp they'd made of my company. Back in my car, I shed Sophie like a skin, the worn shoes kicked off her heels stashed under the seat. They thought they'd humiliated me, but I'd walked away with gold, first-hand proof of their rot, the culture they'd built on disdain. It matched the files, the harassment, the power trips. Only now it was personal. I'd felt their scorn, and it fueled me. The trap was closing, and they were too blind to hear it snap. The evidence was locked tight, the undercover job a final nail. I had everything I needed to end them. The next morning, I didn't slip in as Sophie Miller through some back door. I walked through Horizon Tech's main lobby, heels clicking on marble, past employees who nodded politely, unaware of the storm I carried. At 38, I'd spent years in the shadows, but today I'd step into the light. The boardroom was ready, shareholders summoned, executives gathered, a massive screen looming behind my chair. I sat at the head, calm, a thick folder in front of me, waiting. The doors swung open, and Jim strode in, 42 and smug, his crew, Ethan, Ryan, Noah, trailing like loyal dogs. They thought this was routine, another meeting to applaud their genius. Jim settled into the VP's seat, flashing that grin I'd come to loathe. Then he saw me. His eyes flickered. Confusion, a crack in the mask. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Ryan shifted. Noah smirked, still clueless. No one spoke. They didn't understand yet, couldn't fathom why Jim's unemployed wife sat at the helm. I let the silence stretch, heavy, suffocating. "Sit down, Jim," I said, voice cold, cutting through the room like glass. "You and your friends will want to hear this." He hesitated, jaw tight, but obeyed, his crew following suit, chairs scraping awkwardly. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him, every trace of the timid Mia he knew gone. "Before we begin, I'd like to reintroduce myself." A pause, deliberate, letting it sink in. "I am Mia Thompson, founder and CEO of Horizon Tech." The air vanished. Jim's face drained, Ethan's smirk froze, Ryan's hands twitched, Noah's phone slipped from his grip. Shock rippled, then panic. I clicked a button, and the screen blazed to life. Emails, texts, recordings, transactions, a flood of their sins laid bare. "For 2 years, I've gathered evidence of your misconduct," I said, tone unwavering, each word a hammer. "Every illegal deal, every dollar you stole, every secret you sold to rivals." Screenshots flashed, Jim's kickback emails, Ethan's yacht receipts, Ryan's bid rigging texts, Noah's harassment clips. Gasps rose from the shareholders. "I have it all. Your abuse of power, your lies, even the way you crushed anyone who dared speak up." Jim's mouth opened. No sound came out. He was drowning. "You thought you were untouchable," I continued, standing now, my presence filling the room. "But only because I let you think that." I picked up the termination papers, signed them with a steady hand. 4 crisp sheets, one for each of them, and slid them across the table. "Effective immediately. You're fired from Horizon Tech." Jim shot up, face red, voice a roar. "You can't do this. I'm the VP. I built this place." I cut him off, sharp, final. "You built nothing. I created this company. I hired you. I let you into my life. And now I'm throwing you out." He staggered back, eyes wild, turning to Ethan, Ryan, Noah for backup. They shrank, heads down, abandoning him. The folder stayed closed. I didn't need to open it. The screen spoke enough. "Security's waiting," I said, nodding to the doors. They creaked open, uniformed figures stepping in. Jim trembled, staring at me like I was a stranger. He'd mocked me for years, but now I was the one he feared. I didn't flinch. "Leave quietly, Jim, before I make this worse." The room held its breath as their reign ended, and mine began. The boardroom doors shut behind them, security leading Jim and his crew out like broken toys. I didn't watch them go. I didn't need to. From the upper floors, I glimpsed the lobby through glass panels, employees clustered, whispering, peering as the once mighty execs were escorted past. Jim's head hung low, Ethan's swagger gone, Ryan and Noah trailing like ghosts. News spread fast, a wildfire through Horizon Tech. By noon, financial outlets erupted, headlines screaming, Purge at Horizon Tech. VP and execs axed in corruption sting. Social media lit up, digging into their past, unearthing stories of arrogance and abuse I hadn't even touched. Their fall was swift, brutal, deserved. Within hours, Jim's access to Horizon systems was cut, his office packed into boxes by staff who'd once feared him. Ethan, Ryan, and Noah faced the same, belongings dumped curbside, security badges voided. Rival firms called, but not to hire. Nobody wanted the stench of their disgrace. A week later, word trickled back. Jim's wife filed for divorce, taking what little he had left. Ethan's trophy girlfriend bailed, Ryan's house hit the market. Noah's lawyer scrambled to dodge lawsuits. They crumbled one by one, their luxurious lives unraveling like cheap thread. Horizon Tech didn't stumble, it soared. The purge was a signal, a cleansing. Stock prices ticked up by midday, investors buzzing with confidence in my sudden leadership. Contracts I'd held back flooded in. Partners who'd shunned us under Jim's reign now clamored to sign. The boardroom's silence turned to applause after they left, shareholders shaking my hand, stunned, but grateful. I'd cut the cancer out, and the body healed fast. Employees lingered in the halls, eyes wide, some smiling, relief replacing years of tension. I stood in my office that night, Chicago's skyline glinting beyond the window, the weight of 7 years lifting. Jim was nothing now, a name erased from Horizon's legacy. His crew, too, footnotes in a cautionary tale. I hadn't just won. I'd reclaimed what was mine, not with cruelty, but with precision. The folder of evidence sat on my desk, untouched since the meeting. I'd send it to the SEC later, let the law finish them. For now, it was enough to see their empire turn to ash while mine rose stronger. This wasn't the end, though. It was a beginning. Horizon Tech had been theirs to poison, but now it was mine to rebuild. I'd rooted out the rot, and tomorrow I'd plant something better. Jim thought he'd broken me, but he'd only sharpened the blade I'd used to cut him down. The fallout was over. The future was mine to shape. The fallout settled like dust after a storm, leaving Horizon Tech raw but alive. I didn't waste time mourning Jim's exit or his crew's collapse. There was work to do. The next day, I called an all-company meeting, stepping onto a stage in the atrium, facing thousands of employees who'd only known me as Jim's shadow. At 38, I shed that skin. "I'm Mia Thompson," I said, voice steady, echoing off glass walls. "Founder and CEO, we're starting over, and no one gets left behind." Murmurs rippled, then applause, tentative at first, then fierce. They'd been suffocating under Jim's reign. Now they could breathe. Rebuilding began fast. I fired every enabler, HR drones who'd ignored harassment, managers who'd kissed Jim's ring. Their desks emptied by noon, replaced with talent I'd scouted or wronged souls I brought back. Kelsey Reed was first, a 34-year-old software engineer Jim had axed for skipping his boozy team-building nights. I called her myself. "Do you really want me back?" she asked, voice wary over the line. "I don't just want you back," I said. "I want you leading our AI team." A week later, she walked through the front doors, head high, no fear in her step. Others followed, 20 former employees, pushed out by Jim's clique, now reinstated with purpose. The culture shifted under my hands. I tore down the old rules, built new ones, transparency policies, an anonymous reporting system, ethics training for every manager. No more backroom deals, no more silence. I launched a mentorship program too, pairing veterans with new hires, especially women in tech who'd been sidelined too long. Meetings changed. No condescending snickers, just ideas, voices rising without dread. One afternoon, I passed the break room and saw Kelsey's team laughing over a prototype, passion in their eyes. Horizon Tech wasn't Jim's playground anymore. It was mine, a place for creation, not destruction. Results came quick. 2 months in, we signed 3 major contracts, one with a telecom giant that had shunned us under Jim's stench. Stock prices climbed 35%, investors who'd wavered now clamoring to back me. A Business Insider piece called me the woman who resurrected Horizon. But the numbers and headlines weren't what hit deepest. It was the quiet moments, walking halls where smiles replaced tension, knowing I'd cut the rot and planted something real. 6 months later, standing by my office window, Chicago sprawling under a night sky, I felt it. Peace. Horizon glowed below, floors buzzing with drive, a company reborn. Jim faded while we rose. Word drifted back. He was 42 now, a sales clerk in a suburban electronics store, banned from tech for 3 years by his termination terms. No suits, no Rolex, just a polyester vest and a barcode scanner. His wife took everything in the divorce, left him in a cramped apartment. Friends said he'd hollowed out, weight gone, eyes vacant, a man who'd lost it all. Ethan, Ryan, Noah fared no better. Blacklisted, broke, their names poison in the industry. They were ghosts, irrelevant, while Horizon thrived without them. I didn't track them, didn't need to. Revenge had been the spark, but it wasn't the fire. That burned brighter now, fueled by justice, by the company I'd reclaimed and the people I'd lifted. From my office, I looked back sometimes. Jim's first smile when we met, those dinners where I swallowed his jabs, the boardroom where I broke him. It felt distant, a story I'd outgrown. I'd spent too long in his shadow, letting him think he owned me, but not anymore. The past was a closed book, the future stretched wide. Horizon's expansion proved it. We partnered with a European software firm, Kelsey's AI team outpacing every goal, and that mentorship program grew, pulling young women from obscurity into power. I stood in a boardroom again, not for a purge, but to plan. New markets, new dreams. Employees chatted in the halls, fearless, alive. That's when it clicked. True revenge isn't tearing down, it's building up. I turned Horizon into a symbol, not of Jim's greed, but of fairness, innovation, people who wouldn't be silenced. 6 months after the fall, I leaned against my window, the city's pulse steady below. Horizon's profits hit a record, but the real win was deeper. The laughter in the break room, the trust in the air. Jim thought he'd define me, but he'd only forged me sharper. I didn't need to see him crumble to know I'd won. I felt it in every step through these halls, every deal signed, every life I'd changed. This was my empire, my legacy, and it was only the beginning. So here's the lesson. Power doesn't belong to manipulators, but to those who earn it, through grit, through truth. Success isn't a bank account. It's the mark you leave, the good you build. Jim thrived for a while, but the truth always cuts through. I took my place, not with spite, but with strength. What do you think? Did I do right, stripping them bare to raise something better? Or was there another way? I've laid my story out, yours to judge. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, a sound I'd never noticed until tonight. It was late, past midnight, March 2025, and I, Penelope Hayes, sat on my worn leather couch, phone clutched in my hands. My fingers felt cold against its edges, like they knew something I didn't. A text had pinged an hour ago from Ethan, the 24-year-old junior analyst I'd taken under my wing 3 years back. I thought you should see this before Monday, it read. No context, just a video attachment. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and there he was, Michael Reynolds, my boss of 20 years, standing in the middle of the company's annual staff party. His gray suit was rumpled, a whiskey glass glinted in his hand, and his voice, that unmistakable baritone I'd heard bark orders and dodge blame for 2 decades, sliced through the chatter. Penelope's such a worthless dumbass, he said, a grin splitting his face. Next month, we're getting rid of her. She won't even see it coming. The crowd around him, my coworkers, people I'd shared coffee runs and late-night deadlines with, reacted in a ripple. Some chuckled, nervous and sharp. Others shifted, eyes darting away. No one said a word in my defense. I stared at the screen, the 30-second clip looping before I could stop it. My chest tightened, a sharp, acidic burn creeping up my throat. 20 years at Reynolds and Carter Consulting flashed behind my eyes. Long nights hunched over spreadsheets, missed birthdays with my sister's kids, weekends spent polishing reports so Michael could strut into client meetings looking like a genius. I'd covered for his mistakes, smoothed over his drunken rants at conferences, even defended him when whispers of his incompetence grew too loud. And this was my reward, a punchline delivered to a room full of laughter. I replayed it, forcing myself to listen again. She won't even see it coming. His arrogance dripped from every syllable, thick and smug. My hands shook, not with fear, but with something hotter, something that clawed its way up from the pit of my stomach. Rage, humiliation. And then, beneath it all, a spark, cold, clear, and unyielding, determination. Michael thought I was naive, a loyal dog too dumb to bite back. He was wrong. Dead wrong. By the time the video looped a third time, I wasn't just watching my betrayal. I was planning his ruin. The audience he'd played to would see a different show soon enough, and I'd be the one holding the spotlight. I didn't sleep that night. The bedroom was a cave of shadows, the ceiling stretching above me like a blank slate for my racing mind. I lay there, still in my sweats, the phone discarded on the nightstand like a live wire I couldn't touch again. Michael's voice echoed in my skull. Worthless, dumb ass. Each word a splinter under my skin. 20 years. I'd given Reynolds and Carter everything. Every late night, every canceled plan, every time I'd bitten my tongue when he took credit for my work. I'd saved his ass more times than I could count, and he'd turned me into a joke. My eyes traced the cracks in the plaster, and something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and jagged, but it was hardening into something else. I thought of every report I'd rewritten for him, every client I'd charmed while he fumbled. He wasn't the mastermind he pretended to be. I was. And he'd just handed me the match to burn his house down. By the time the first gray light slipped through the blinds, I'd made up my mind. If Michael thought I'd go quietly, if he believed I'd shuffle into Monday oblivious to his knife, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. I didn't need sleep. I needed a plan. And as the clock ticked toward dawn, I felt the first threads of it weaving together, tight, deliberate, and sharp enough to cut. I walked into Reynolds and Carter at 7:55 a.m., same as always. The office buzzed with its usual Monday hum, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, the faint smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air like a bad omen. My heartbeat was steady, my face a mask of calm I'd perfected over years of swallowing Michael's nonsense. I'd dressed sharp, black blazer, crisp white blouse, because today wasn't just another day. It was the start of the game. Michael's office door was wide open, a beacon of arrogance. He leaned back in his chair, laughing with James, the 50-year-old CFO who'd always been too eager to kiss the ring. I paused in the doorway, letting my shadow fall across the carpet. "Morning, Michael," I said, my voice polite, a smile curling just enough to look routine. His eyes flicked to me, and for a split second, I saw it. Something beneath his grin. Not guilt, not hesitation, but smugness. Thick as the whiskey he'd held Saturday night. "Good weekend?" he asked, his tone light, like he hadn't mocked me to a crowd 48 hours ago. I nodded, meeting his gaze. "Great weekend. Feeling refreshed for another productive month." His smirk widened, a predator sure of his prey. "That's what I like to hear," he said, leaning forward slightly as if daring me to flinch. I didn't. I turned, walked to my desk, and sat down, the weight of his ignorance settling over me like a cloak. He thought he had me cornered, a lamb waiting for the slaughter. He had no idea I'd already sharpened the knife. The office pulsed around me, interns shuffling papers, the copier wheezing in the corner. But my mind was elsewhere. I opened my laptop, fingers hovering over the keys, and let the facade lock into place. For now, I'd play the part, loyal Penelope, clueless and compliant. But beneath it, I was already moving pieces he couldn't see. If he thought I'd blindly walk into my own execution, he didn't know me at all. I glanced at his office again, his laughter drifting out like a taunt. Enjoy it, Michael, I thought. It's the last time you'll laugh on my dime. The game had begun, and I was 3 steps ahead before he'd even rolled the dice. The next 4 weeks were a performance, every move rehearsed to perfection. I walked into Reynolds and Carter each morning with the same composed smile, my heels clicking against the tile like a metronome counting down Michael's days. The office hummed around me, phones trilling, the printer's endless whine. But I was a ghost in the chaos, playing the role of the perfect employee. I nodded in meetings, offered solutions with just the right amount of enthusiasm, and took on extra work without a flicker of complaint. Late nights became my sanctuary, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as I stayed past the others, fingers flying over my keyboard. But I wasn't polishing reports for Michael anymore. I was collecting. Emails piled up in a hidden folder. Every careless directive he'd sent, every backhanded compliment buried in a thread. Contracts followed, ones I'd drafted or salvaged, each a testament to the work he'd claimed as his own. Financial reports, too. Sloppy numbers James had signed off on, gaps I'd quietly filled for years. Most wouldn't think twice about these scraps, but I did. I thought twice about everything. Beneath the surface, I was building a net to drag Michael down, thread by thread. And it wasn't just paper I gathered. I reached out to old clients, the ones who'd stayed loyal to me, not him, casual calls, a subtle hint. I'm considering new opportunities. Their responses were immediate, eager. Penelope, we'd follow you anywhere. I smiled into the receiver, filing their trust away for later. Then there was the attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, mid-30s, who met me over coffee downtown. I laid out the groundwork, severance clauses, non-competes, the legal edges I could dance along. She nodded, pen tapping her notepad. You've got options, she said. Play this right and he'll feel it where it hurts. I left with her card and a plan taking shape. The final piece clicked when I dialed Pierce and Associates, a competitor that had been sniffing around Reynolds and Carter for months. Their VP, a clipped voice named Laura, didn't hesitate. We've heard about you, Penelope. Let's talk. I hung up, staring at the city lights beyond my window. Michael's whiskey-soaked laugh from that video looped in my mind, fueling every step. I wasn't just leaving. I was taking everything he took for granted with me. Clients, credibility, control. 4 weeks of smiling through the lie, and I was ready to pull the first string. The morning of my final day broke gray and heavy, the air thick with a tension only I could feel. I arrived at Reynolds and Carter early, before the sun had fully risen, my laptop bag slung over my shoulder like a weapon. The office was quiet, just the hum of the HVAC and the faint drip of the coffee machine. I settled at my desk, watching the minutes tick toward the end game. Across the floor, Michael's office glowed. He was in there, laughing with James again, their voices carrying, like they owned the world. Oblivious. Arrogant. I let my gaze linger, a polite smile fixed on my face, masking the storm brewing beneath. The day crawled forward, normalcy a thin veneer over the shift I sensed coming. I answered emails, nodded at coworkers, kept my posture relaxed, even as my pulse thrummed with purpose. At 3 p.m., The door to Michael's office swung wider, and Rachel from HR stepped inside, her face carefully neutral. She didn't glance my way, but I knew. My phone stayed silent, a coiled snake waiting to strike. Then, at 3:30, it lit up. "Michael Reynolds, please come to my office." The summons I'd anticipated for weeks. I exhaled slowly, smoothing my brow with steady hands. This wasn't a surprise. It was a stage, and I'd memorized my lines. I stood, feeling the weight of 20 years shift, not a burden anymore, but a lever. Michael thought he'd catch me off guard, call me in with some rehearsed speech about budgets and restructuring. He had no idea I was already 3 steps ahead, the trap set and waiting. I crossed the floor, heels clicking. Showtime. I knocked on Michael's door, stepping inside with the same polite smile I'd worn all month. The office smelled of leather and stale ambition, Rachel seated across from him with a company-issued folder in front of her. Standard HR protocol, a scene I'd witnessed from the other side too many times. Michael put on his best fake sympathy, leaning back in his chair like a king granting an audience. "Penelope, please, have a seat," he said, voice measured, scripted. I sat, folding my hands in my lap, meeting his gaze without a flicker. "We appreciate your dedication to the company over the last 20 years, he began, the words hollow as they rolled off his tongue. "But as you know, the industry's evolving, and we've had to make some difficult decisions regarding staffing." Rachel stayed silent, her eyes on the folder. "We've decided to restructure your role," he continued, "and unfortunately, your position is being phased out." She slid the folder across the table, a severance package wrapped in corporate courtesy. I didn't touch it. "We want to ensure a smooth transition," he added, watching me. He expected tears, anger, confusion, something to feed his ego. Instead, I smiled, soft and steady. "I understand," I said. He blinked, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face. "Too easy. Too clean." He cleared his throat. "We'll need your company laptop and access badge before the end of the day. And, of course, a non-disclosure agreement regarding operations." I nodded, still calm. They wanted me quiet, a ghost fading without a whisper. Then he leaned forward, voice dropping into false warmth. "I know this must be difficult, but you're talented, Penelope. I'm sure you'll land on your feet." I tilted my head, just enough to unsettle him. "Oh, I know I will," I said, my tone smooth as glass. His relief flashed, brief, misplaced, before I stood picking up the folder with that same smile. I walked out, the weight of 20 years lifting off my shoulders. Not his victory, but mine. Now I was free to burn it all down. Back at my desk, the clock ticked toward 5 p.m., my final hours as an employee slipping away. I moved with purpose, archiving every email, every project file, every client contract I could touch, all perfectly legal while I still had access. The office buzzed with its usual end-of-day chatter, coworkers oblivious to the fuse I was lighting. I opened a new email, addressed it to Thomas Bennett, our biggest client, the one who'd made up 40% of our revenue for a decade. My fingers hovered, then typed, "Hi, Thomas. I wanted to thank you for your partnership over the years. Given my upcoming departure from Reynolds & Carter, I'll be available for consulting in the near future. Would love to discuss how I can continue assisting your company. Let me know if you'd like to set up a call." I hit send. I packed my things, pens, a photo of my niece, the laptop I'd surrender, smiling at coworkers with polite goodbyes. Just another employee leaving. At 5 o'clock sharp, I walked out, the glass doors hissing shut behind me. I didn't look back. Michael had no idea what I'd just unleashed, but he'd feel it soon enough. The morning after my departure, I woke to my phone buzzing against the nightstand, the sound sharp in the stillness of my apartment. I checked the screen. 3 missed calls from Reynolds & Carter by 10 a.m., all unknown extensions, but I knew who they traced back to. I leaned back against my pillows, a slow smile forming as I let the fourth call ring out. Daniel thought he could contain this, that a few days would pass before the fallout hit. He'd misjudged me again, and his arrogance was speeding up the clock. By noon, a text from Ethan buzzed through. "Penelope, whatever you did, the office is in full meltdown mode. Thomas pulled out of his contract. Michael's losing it." I laughed out loud, the sound echoing off the bare walls. Thomas Bennett, the client I'd emailed on my way out, had seen the writing on the wall. No Penelope, no stability, no reason to stay. At 2:30 p.m., my phone lit up again, this time with a name, Michael Reynolds. I answered, keeping my tone calm, almost bored. "Hello?" A sharp exhale crackled through the line, then his voice, tight and controlled. "Penelope, I just heard about Thomas. He mentioned you reached out." I let the silence stretch, savoring his unease. "I did," I said simply. A beat of quiet, then he forced a chuckle, the sound brittle. "Listen, I think there's been some miscommunication. This was just office banter. You know that." I cut in, my voice dangerously light. "I don't hold grudges, Michael. I just make smart decisions." His breathing tightened, a faint hitch I could almost feel through the phone. "Are you working for someone else?" he pressed, desperation creeping in. I smiled, twirling a pen between my fingers. "I don't see how that's relevant to you." He cursed under his breath, and I hung up, the click a punctuation mark on his dawning panic. Thomas had made a smart decision too, and Michael was only beginning to realize how bad his mistake had been. That afternoon, I stepped into Pierce & Associates' downtown office, the sleek glass walls a stark contrast to the dated clutter of Reynolds and Carter. David Pierce, the 52-year-old CEO, greeted me with a firm handshake, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Penelope," he said, leading me to a conference room. "The moment I heard you were leaving, I had my team watching. Michael's ship is sinking." I gave him a knowing smile, settling into a leather chair as he leaned forward, elbows on the table. "And you want to take advantage of that," I said. He smirked. "I want us both to win." I pulled a file from my bag, projections I'd built from memory, client renewals I'd tracked, weaknesses in Michael's contracts I'd exploited for years to keep them afloat. I slid it across the table. "If you want to take them down, start here." David flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with satisfaction as he scanned the numbers, the names, the leverage I'd handed him. "This is gold," he muttered, then looked up. "I assume you're not giving this away for free." I smiled, leaning back. "No, I'm not." His grin widened, a predator recognizing another. "Let's talk terms." By the time I left, the deal was sealed. I wasn't just joining Pierce. I was bringing Michael's clients with me, a migration he'd feel like a gut punch. The file was my opening salvo, but the real blow would land when those contracts started bleeding out of his grasp. Michael was about to realize what true panic felt like, and I'd be watching from the other side of the battlefield, coffee in hand. Monday morning, I sat in my new office at Pierce, a corner space with a view of the skyline, when Ethan's next text buzzed through at 8:15. "Holy hell, Penelope. Michael just stormed into the main office. He looks like he hasn't slept. I swear he's about to combust." I smirked, picturing him unraveling, tie askew, voice cracking as he barked at underlings. The first wave had hit. 3 major clients, ones I'd nursed through a decade of Michael's fumbles, had sent termination notices before the doors even opened. Pierce had moved fast, faster than Michael could have anticipated, and I was the architect of it all. By 9 o'clock, the cracks were fractures. James had locked himself in his office, crunching numbers to tally the damage, while legal scrambled for loopholes to trap the fleeing clients. Michael, though, was on the phones, his voice hoarse as he begged executives to stay, pleas that fell on ears already tuned to my quiet promises. At noon, he called me again, his tone strained, on edge. "Penelope," he snapped, I don't know what you've been telling people, but we have a serious problem. I arched an eyebrow, though he couldn't see it. Oh, what kind of problem? He exhaled sharply. You know damn well what kind. Thomas is gone, and now 3 other accounts have pulled out. Millions in revenue overnight. Did you? He stopped, unwilling to say it. I let the silence drag, then spoke, calm and careful. I don't work for Reynolds and Carter anymore, Michael. What happens to your company isn't my concern. A beat of silence, then his voice turned sharp. You're working for Pierce, aren't you? I smiled. I don't see how that's relevant to you. He cursed, louder this time, and I could almost see him gripping his desk, power slipping through his fingers. This industry's small, Penelope. You don't want to burn bridges. I let out a small laugh, cold and deliberate. You burned that bridge the moment you called me a worthless dumbass in front of the entire company. He went quiet, and I hung up, the fear in his silence sweeter than any apology. By 3 p.m., Ethan texted again. Emergency board meeting just called. Investors are freaking out. Talk of replacing Michael. I leaned back, satisfaction rolling through me. He'd hidden behind my work for years, but now the ugly truth was bare, and it was killing him faster than he could scream. Tuesday morning, I walked into Reynolds and Carter, not as an employee, but as a warning. The office was a graveyard of tension, the usual chatter replaced by whispers behind screens, quick glances darting my way. I crossed the floor, heels echoing, until I reached Michael's office. I knocked, and his gruff, "Come in," rasped through the door. I stepped inside, closing it behind me. He sat at his desk, tie loosened, dark circles bruising his eyes, his arrogance stripped bare. I took a seat across from him, mirroring our firing scene a week ago, and tilted my head. How's it going, Michael? I asked, voice light. His jaw clenched, a muscle twitching. Cut the crap, Penelope. What do you want? I smiled, letting the question hang. Me? I just wanted to see how you were doing. He let out a bitter laugh, the sound scraping the air. Oh, you know how I'm doing. I did. He took a deep breath, leaning forward. Look, if there's a way to fix this, to make it right, what would it take? The desperation in his voice was thick, a surrender I'd waited for. I leaned in, voice soft but firm. There's no fixing this, Michael. His expression hardened, but his eyes flickered with defeat. I stood, smoothing my blazer. Enjoy unemployment, I said, turning to leave. Before I walked out, I glanced back, delivering the final cut he'd never expected. And then I was gone, leaving him in the ruins he'd built. By Friday, the headlines hit like a thunderclap, plastering Michael's ruin across every screen I scrolled past. Major client exodus at Reynolds and Carter, CEO under fire, blared one. Pierce and Associates acquires key clients in strategic move, crowed another. I sat in my new office at Pierce, sipping coffee, the bitter brew a perfect match for the satisfaction curling through me. The empire Michael had built on my sweat and his swagger was crumbling into dust, and the world was watching. At 10 a.m., Ethan's text buzzed through. Penelope, you're not going to believe this. Emergency investor meeting. Rumor is they're forcing Michael out. I leaned back, smiling to myself. Right on schedule. At 3 p.m., the internal email from Reynolds and Carter confirmed it. Effective immediately, Michael Reynolds has stepped down as CEO. An interim leadership team will be announced soon. I read it twice, letting the words sink in. Fired, publicly humiliated, gone. Then, at 5:30, my inbox pinged again. Subject, let's talk, from Michael himself. I opened it, his desperation spilling out. Penelope, things have gotten out of control. I know you're behind this. Let's meet. Put this behind us. Predictable, pathetic. I typed back, fingers steady. Michael, there's nothing to discuss. This isn't fixable. Enjoy your weekend. I hit send, closing the last chapter of his career with a click. He was finished, and I was just getting started. Monday morning, I stepped into Pearson Associates headquarters as their newest senior partner, the title earned not by groveling, but by proving I was the best. David greeted me in the executive lounge, his handshake firm. "Welcome aboard, Penelope," he said. "From what I hear, you've already made quite an impact." I smiled, feeling the weight of possibility settle over me. "I like to be efficient," he chuckled. "Exactly what we need." This wasn't just a job, it was a fresh start, built on my terms. That afternoon, my assistant knocked hesitantly. "Penelope, you have a visitor, Michael Reynolds." I raised an eyebrow, then nodded. "Send him in." He shuffled through the door, a shadow of the man he'd been. No suit, no smirk, just tired eyes and a drawn face. "You really did it, huh?" he muttered, voice hollow. I tilted my head. "You destroyed yourself, Michael." He exhaled sharply. "I need a job." I stood, meeting his gaze with a cold smile. "You don't need a job. You need a lesson." I turned back to my desk, dismissing him without another word. That night I sat by the window, wine in hand, the city skyline glittering below. "I win," I whispered, the words a quiet toast to the future I'd claimed.